Yeah.
XFCU.
Yeah.
Well, the help is not on the network.
All right.
It's a suite. Get a long cord and run around. Oh, that's a space.
Yep.
Yes, I got an email from him. He said he had something else to do or something. Couldn't make it. But he said he won't be forward. Actually, just emailed us this morning. He probably emailed, yeah, you too.
Tableau TV, TABLO TV. There you go.
Where's the cost for the TiVo guide?
I don't remember. I think it's like $12 or $15 a month.
So it's somewhat less when you take it. How come it's less?
I never had a Tito, so I don't know.
I'd really like to talk to the guy.
Without that, though, it would be useless because you couldn't find it. You couldn't schedule any recordings.
Oh, I think you can do things manually.
Yeah, you'd have to manually sit there and record at a certain time.
Yeah, well, you go in and you program it.
Oh, you can program
channel.
If you can figure out what time it's supposed to.
I think so.
Program a time.
I think so, but you won't get any of the metadata. You won't
You
get
can't
any.
just click on a program and say, okay, I'm going to record this one.
Right, I think so. I mean, we have to have the guide to do it.
All right.
Well, the wire's not going to work. They're only 6 feet.
Hearing you guys talk about DVR stuff, it's not getting worked out. I'm trying to do that myth. I don't know if you heard. We're trying to work on that myth on Windows.
Not on Windows. I've been there, done that.
It's hard. I'm trying to
Yeah, I didn't ever try with Windows. When I tried it on Linux, I used to run like 3 servers in the house and all this different stuff. I just got tired of it. I used to run Windows Media Center, and technically I still do, but that's not what I use to record my TV shows. I use something called Tableau TV to record my TV shows for me because I got tired of stuff getting missed or stuff not working right, and just Tableau TV. It's an actual product. It's a hardware product that you plug it into your antenna, plug in a USB hard drive, and it records the shows and everything for you.
So you're not on cable or anything?
No.
It's all prepackaged, ready to go, and everything. Not a lot of configuring.
Pretty much, yeah. You add a USB hard drive. I think they've got a 2-tuner and a 4-tuner model. And they're actually coming up with launching a new model. They announced it at CES this week. It's going to have the antenna already integrated in it. So for people who are within like 25 miles of broadcast towers.
I think some guy that was here before a long time ago.
Peter Hansen, yeah, he's really big into myth. He's done it. But Facebook, we have Facebook group. We've got a Google Plus group.
I'll do Google Plus.
Yeah,
H-A-N-S-E-N or H-A-N-S-O-N?
Hanson. Peter Hansen. I'm sitting here looking at his picture right now.
Okay, so you're gonna do a Google Hangout for this one today?
Yeah, we're trying to.
Which one is he?
He's right there. Oh, let me get this posted and I'll.
No, wait here.
Okay. Yeah, he looks kind of young, so he's been married recently.
Yeah, he just got married. I think he's. I think they're expecting.
Get on the Google Plus. Do I need to get some kind of invite or
Just search for NTLUG or North
Okay.
Texas Linux Users Group.
Okay.
You say if you noticed, I've never abused it. Well, yeah, it's because somebody's putting carpeting in their house. And what was he thinking?
I don't care what you want to think.
I'm sure what he did.
It's not, it's-
It's just not the person who used it. A long time. I didn't. I got dropped off. Now the track all those expenses going to the corporate brothers who didn't see all those expenses. You lost it. So, yeah. Did you put up that? No, they're only 6 foot cubes.
Anybody got a long cable?
There's a box of them over there.
Yeah, they're only 6 foot.
Unplug it.
No, this is the
Oh, that's wrong. Where's the other one to it? Hold on, it's plugged into that router down there.
Well, there's, wait a second, let's see where this goes.
You can unplug it at the other end though. I think
No, that's fine. This will work. Okay, just tell everybody there's a
Well, which one is it? Which one is it?
there's 3 ends, so obviously, you know.
Here we go.
There's a cord here. Nobody trip over it? No, there's a whole box over there.
I was just showing you how to do it, actually.
There's a whole box of snakes up there if you want.
Well, I was just showing you. It's like, as Kirk said, you never find the problem fixes it.
I didn't find it, I just noticed it. Oh, yeah.
It's still very conservative.
Now, we don't know if it will work. Especially for in the back, you can see the back of the switch.
Like,
Is it working now?
yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is that what this fiber? What's that plugged into? On that? No, right there. You see?
I'm following it. It's plugged into port 1.
That's the problem. What is messed up?
Is that a special port?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's the problem.
It's just
Okay, who wants to steal the computer to see that much?
Yeah, I couldn't do that. Nobody does.
Well, you go for that. What
Will that be even worse?
Or no, what's the?
well, the WAN port probably on the front.
Well, it's not a firewall. It's just a switch. Yeah, it's just a Soho.
This has been interesting if you watch the streams or nothing.
Actually, links down there. Probably good.
Everybody,
So obviously this is for. Why does it look like?
try a punches and check. This is good.
Am I in the zone?
Try a punches and check it.
You got a holstered. Okay. Bro.
Often it's usually an SSD, right? The OS.
SSD. The OS is on the SSD.
Yeah, I find my ones don't with the SSD. It goes fast, but somebody's confused. It's just, yeah.
What do I do with the Google Plus?
Just click. Okay. So search for Texas Linux Group. No, the full thing. There you go. Just click on that. And yeah. Oh wait, that's the group. That's not the group. Sorry, that's the user account. Search here. Down here. Choose that. Communities. And now search for communities there. Type it in North Texas. It's not one yet. Probably wait. Linux. Yeah, space Linux.
Oh, right.
I guess the next problem here.
Join the group. You want people to see what groups you're part of. Something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the same thing we did.
No problem, is it?
Oh, here it is down here. It's in there, isn't it? Is that it?
September. So click on go up. So I just right there. Yeah, that's the event. Click on that.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
That's why I switched to a Mac. They would always happen to update Flash, update Java, and then it would work, and then it wouldn't work, and just I managed too many network devices.
he,
One guy, I was still
Yeah.
The flash is not on that one.
It is, but it doesn't break as often.
Well, if you have Google Chrome, you know, it's already got his off,
Yeah.
Chrome.
They're okay. Gotcha.
Well, it's important to know once in the life cycle of doing things.
Yeah, it would be. Right.
yeah.
It's tough to,
Yeah, that's
it's tough to track it. It's if you buy one from the phone company, and if you buy it from, let's say, Best Buy or somebody who's got another partner, so if you buy some,
Proper politics of life. It's okay. It used to be my one in the OS or something population. It's all this scared. It's not special software.
Yeah, it's already installed, yeah. Go ahead and check it work.
Whose distribution is it? Who did you boot to?
no, it's Ubuntu, which was connected.
Yeah.
It's a Ubuntu server with just a light,
Question is that's what you're trying to repair.
14.
It's
I
not.
mean, when you dot slash.
No, right now we just have a.
Find 12. You got slashed, you said, oh, it's
Well, LTS is paid for. That's your life CD.
let's say you had a program out there that you didn't sell. That's the only guess I've got is that you've got an old.
Oh, you are? Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Quite right. Oh, that's good. It's good. Good.
Yes. Good point.
Advanced reporting mode. It's in there. There's no way to change the password in the recovery mode.
See, that's what I don't know. This
It's the Holiday Inn.
is.
Okay, so I'm calling because one of our band members is suspended. Why? Delia Garcia.
Let's go direct.
And let me stop my sharing. All right, so meetings are now being broadcasted over the internet, and trying to, because a lot of people sometimes aren't able to personally come and attend themselves, so we're trying to get it more accessible. We're engaging with social media more in addition to the mailing lists. If you don't know it, my name is Corey, and on the social media aspect, we've got a group out on Facebook. We've got a group out on Google Plus. Just search for North Texas Linux Users Group. There is a LinkedIn group. There's a Twitter account, twitter.com/NTLUG.
What's the LinkedIn group called?
I think it's North Texas Linux Users Group.
Okay.
Or NTLUG. It's going to be one of those two. I'm not sure which one it is, but we're trying to get more engaged, more communicative, more collaborative, try and get more involvement. We also have an IRC chat room. Pretty much Ralph and I are the only ones that are in there. Every now and then Kirk drops in, says hi, how's it going, stuff like that. But it's the IRC chat room is on irc.freenode.net, and it's under the pound NTLUG is the channel name. Get in there, ask questions. Someone might be able to help you or not. You can send stuff to mailing lists, but hopefully we can regrow that chat room capability again, because chat is actually starting to make a comeback again. I've been using it in my last 2 jobs, using chat more than we have been emailing back and forth. So that being said, today's topic I was going to discuss OpenStack. Is the virtualization. It's a buzzword that you guys are all hearing about. I've dealt with over the past 3 or 4 years. Actually, I started with virtualization back in 2005. Started with VMware, and over time lost interest with it because of the cost associated with it. And I've moved on to Proxmox, and now I'm moving to OpenStack. That being said, how many people here have actually dealt with virtualization or use virtualization on a day-to-day basis? What do you typically use? VirtualBox. Citrix Zen, okay.
I use
VirtualBox. VirtualBox. Yeah, VirtualBox is the mainstream one that, not mainstream, but it's the one that's typically used by most home users. It's very machine-centric, so that's what I have on here. I use whenever I'm on my laptop. I don't do dual boot anymore. I don't bother with that. I just run one OS on my main laptop, and then I use VirtualBox if I'm wanting to test out an ISO or distribution like that. So I don't have to worry about multiple partitions or anything. And if I foobar it, I can just revert back or reinstall without any problems. So if you've not experimented with virtualization yet, check it out. Download VirtualBox, install it, give it a try, and go from there. That being said, I haven't really looked into VirtualBox's commercial offerings from a business standpoint, and most of the stuff that I do is for business needs. And originally, like I said, I started with VMware and found that so the virtualization concept is you take one piece of hardware and you're able to run multiple operating systems on it. And what we found was that most of the servers were not getting fully utilized. They're not getting the full, using the full RAM, the full processor, storage, stuff like that. And so when VMware came out, the concept of being able to run operating systems inside of an environment. So you guys understand that. With VMware, because of the VirtualBox usage. With VMware, you're able to connect to like a centralized storage, like a NAS or a SAN or some sort of centralized storage or iSCSI componentry, NFS, stuff like that. So you've got one box or one device where you store all your information about your virtual machines. And VMware talks to those devices. And if you want to be able to move the VM from one server to another, you got to power it off and then remove it from inventory, add it to inventory if you're using their free offerings. If you wish to be able to boot it while it's live, you got to pay. If you want to be able to move storage from one storage device to another device, you got to pay. With everything with VMware, it seems like you've got to pay. So that, and in addition to being able to pay for that, you also have to pay for the support. You're required to have a 1-year or 3-year support agreement. That being said, most of my businesses that I work with are nonprofits or they're small budget or they don't have the money for VMware. A short time later, I discovered Proxmox. Proxmox it's based off Debian, and it does a lot of the offerings that VMware has. You can have one host act independently of each other, or you can have multiple hosts talking to a central storage, where that storage is a SAN, whether it be some sort of iSCSI device. They actually now support Ceph, Gluster FS, multiple storage capabilities. It's free. It's driven through a web interface, and then you use Java as a Java virtual machine to connect everything to command GUI and stuff like that. The issue with Proxmox that I found was that you do take a bit of a performance hit. When you're comparing Proxmox to VMware, the actual performance of your virtual machines does take a hit, but it's free. You can migrate from one host to another host, free. Migrate from one storage device to another storage device, free. Let me see, make sure there's no money in the IRC. I doubt it. Yep. And I have no way of knowing if there's any viewers here or not. So the new word on the block for the past couple of years has been OpenStack. And a lot of times it's been intimidating to me. I haven't looked into it because it's like Swift and Glance and Neutron and Nova and all these buzzwords. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? And it's not easy. It wasn't easy to install. You'd have to, if you went the Ubuntu route, you'd have to install a node, and then you have to do a bunch of command line stuff and run a bunch of scripts and configure this, configure that, or whatever. Well, about 4 months ago or so, I found something called Mirantis Fuel. And I've gotten to the point in my career where I don't have time to be doing stuff on command line all the time. What I like, and so I like ISOs. I like an ISO that I can download, install, boom, it's done. I like pfSense because of the firewall capabilities. Install it, it's done. I don't have to mess with command line IP tables. Used to like FreeNAS because it was an ISO I can install with web GUI management. Done. So Mirantis Fuel, Mirantis has that. Let me get my cursor over here and let me switch to sharing the screen, even though there's nobody watching as far as I can tell.
Trying to.
Trying to?
Yeah, not getting it.
Screen share, desktop 2, start screen share, present to everyone. Because it tells me there's 0 viewers, but I have no idea how many people are here. So the Mirantis Fuel is, they took all the hard part of OpenStack and made it an ISO that you install. And so you install an ISO. It doesn't take a dedicated machine or dedicated VM. You install this, and then you use this Mirantis Fuel to manage all your other nodes or all your other servers. So the difference between OpenStack and VMware is how it ties together. With VMware, with Proxmox, with Hyper-V, you're able to have like a standalone server, and it acts as your device. Well, when you start adding multiple servers like that, you have to go have a way to manage those. You have to, okay, well, I want to spin up a new VM, and you have to say, okay, do I have the resources on this host? You have to look and see, no, I don't have enough resources on that host. I'll put it over here on this host. And you have to balance that. You have to manually manage all that stuff yourself. With the OpenStack, at minimum, it takes 2 nodes, two servers to be able to set up an OpenStack environment. You have the control node. Let me see if I can find it on here. I don't have a very good screenshot or anything, but basically, you have your control node. Everything routes through that control node. Use that control node to manage all the rest of your servers. So once you start adding in multiple servers, it knows what those servers are doing. It knows how much storage those servers has. It knows how much processors that storage has, or that server has. And those are called your compute nodes. It knows how many how much CPUs you use. So it manages all that for you. So when you launch a new instance, it does all that for you. The benefits where this comes into play is in a software development environment. You typically have developers. They want to be able to spin up their own stuff on demand. You don't have to provision it, configure it for them, and stuff like that. OpenStack gives them the ability to do that. So in OpenStack, you have, like I said, a minimum of 2 nodes. You have your compute node, your controller node that everything routes through and handles everything. Then you have your compute node. You can split it up as far as you want. You could have a storage node where everything is ran off of your storage. You could have, there's 2 types of networking. There's like this basic Nova networking, which is really simple for the small business. It's just flat one VLAN for all the stuff. The Neutron, which supposedly is where they're going, they're trying to phase out the Nova. The Neutron is much more complex. It's more for the enterprise level, like your NASA's, your Rackspace, those guys who want that kind of stuff. I'm really hoping that they end up not phasing out Nova, because when I played with a Neutron, it's more complex than it needs to be. And so they're going to really limit themselves in the small business sector.
Let me ask a quick question. You said you've got a control station, and then you've got the actual virtualized host.
Right.
Did I hear you correctly? Everything passes through the control station? In other words, it's not just a configuration device. It has to be up for everything else to work?
True.
Okay.
Yes, that is one downside of that. I think I'm still trying to get underneath the nuts and bolts of it. Like I said, I've been working with it about 3 or 4 months. I think depending on how you configure it, so how many people here have used AWS, Amazon EC2 instances? Okay, how it typically works is the virtualized instances on AWS and OpenStack, everything gets a private IP address, like a 10.1 whatever. And then you have an external IP address. It's a NAT concept. So you assign one IP address, and then there's a private IP address, and it routes through there. That's either handled by the compute node or by the control node, depending on how you set it up yourself, configure yourself. So I'll go ahead and cover it a little bit. What I've done is, let me see here. Let me find the right screen. Okay, so I'm running VirtualBox on my laptop, and you can actually run OpenStack inside of VirtualBox using Mirantis. So I've gone in and I've set up 3 nodes. Everything manages PXE. Have anybody here done PXE booting? Managed like boot up to over the network and boot up an OS, install from that? Okay, well, Fuel handles all that for you. So it sees the nodes, boots to the network, does the install, does everything for you from that aspect. So I have 1 Fuel node VM running, which is this screen here you see, and 3 instances. So go in, I log in. Let me get over here to the screen. It's ask if you want to register, blah, blah, blah. And if you look up here in the top right, you see that I have now finished the install, and it's detected my 3 nodes, my 3 individual nodes. Like I said, you require a minimum of 2, one to be a compute node and one to be a control node. But I'm going to set this environment up with 1 control node and 2 compute nodes, and then use the storage.
They have to be 2 physical nodes.
Yes.
Okay. Where's your other physical node? If you're showing us all of this.
I have 3 virtual machines.
Yeah.
I'm running this inside of a virtual environment.
Okay.
You can run OpenStack inside. It's intended for bare metal.
Yes.
But you can also run it inside of a virtual environment itself.
But you say that it requires the control node and the virtualization node. They have to be separate boxes.
Yes.
Where's your? Are you saying physical boxes or virtual boxes?
In this sense, they can be virtual.
Okay.
You want to run it on bare metal, but in the demonstration that I'm doing, everything's virtual.
Okay, so it's not required to be a separate physical box for the control node and the virtualization node.
Not physical, no.
Okay.
But you're going to want to.
Well, yeah, you want
to do it. This is just for demonstration.
Yeah, sure.
So you go in, you create a new environment, and you can install it either on Ubuntu or on CentOS. You choose what you want to do. Because of everything from the networking side, it requires VLAN tagging and everything. They recommend using Ubuntu because that's a lot easier to manage. The CentOS requires specialized, you do extra configuration to get the VLAN stuff to work. So I've been to choose the Ubuntu multi-node versus with HA or just simply multi-node. So multi-mode HA means high availability. So it requires a minimum 1 control node, but you can actually scale that out and add multiple control nodes for failover. So you can have like 3 control nodes, 5 compute nodes, whatever. And your control nodes, it's all like a virtual IP, so everything moves back and forth. So if 1 control node goes down, another control node picks up the responsibility of the one that was lost, and everything routes through that then.
So I assume you're connecting with the control nodes through a domain name, because if you do an IP address.
Or IP address.
Or IP address?
Yeah.
So you're virtualizing the IP address. You're, in essence, teaming or doing whatever you call it.
It uses like HA proxy and RabbitMQ and some of those technologies to move that IP address around. So if the host goes down, that IP address moves to another host.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to
You said VLANs.
Yeah.
That presumes you're operating your hosts on different subnets.
yes.
Is that,
I'll demonstrate that.
is that a requirement?
Yes.
Or it's a requirement.
Yes. Let me walk through the install and then I'll explain
Yeah.
all that. So we're going through the multi-node. Typically, you're going to choose KVM if you're running on bare metal. You can also run this on VMware, but if you're going to run VMware, why are you here? Might as well run VMware on VMware stuff if you have the budget to run on VMware. So typically, you'll choose KVM, but I'm choosing QEMU, however you pronounce it, because I'm running inside a VirtualBox. So here's the different network technologies. They have Neutron with VLAN segmentation, Neutron with GRE, Neutron VMware, or Legacy. I've found that the Legacy is the easiest for the small business component. Hopefully they don't get rid of it. Click next. So in storage, so you have Cinder and Glance. Cinder is your virtual storage for your virtual machines. That's when you add a volume or a hard drive to a virtual instance, that's managed via Cinder. Glance handles all your, like if you want to boot to VMware, if you want to, not VMware, if you want to boot to Ubuntu, if you want to boot to CentOS, something along those lines, that's stored there as well. Or if you take a backup, like a snapshot of it, it's managed in Glance. The reason why I'm setting up 2 compute nodes is so I can use Ceph storage, and so what that does is it copies it on 2 different servers.
Now, when you say virtual storage, is that virtual storage simply storage, or is it an OS providing storage services?
OS providing storage services.
Okay, so it's like a NAS or a SAN.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm using Ceph so that it gets reproduced on multiple nodes. When you do the default, Cinder or Glance, they're only on 1 node.
Okay.
So if that node goes down, you lose that storage.
Okay.
And then there's other options you can choose, but I'm not going to mess with that. So that's it. That's the configuration of getting up an environment. And then
you talk about HA. If you're all in one physical box, then the only reason for HA is
you're not going to be on 1 physical box in a real environment.
Okay.
In a real environment, you're going to have multiple physical boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you go in, you add a node, you tell it, I want a controller node, and you just choose one. It gives you the breakdown of the hardware. So I've got 3 virtual machines on my laptop here that's running. I'm choosing one as my control node. And then I'm going to go in, I'm going to add node, and I'm going to choose 2 for my compute and my storage. And apply changes. Then I go in and I configure my interfaces. So let me go in and explain networks. So how OpenStack works is there's multiple networks. There is the public network. That is the network that you're going to access your virtual machines at. That is like your public IP address. You're outside your NAT. That's the IPs that you're going to handle. Then you have the management network. That management network is how the hosts all talk to each other. That's how the compute nodes talk to the control nodes talk to the compute nodes, the storage nodes, whatever. That's its own separate network.
Is that where HA is implemented?
Yes.
Okay.
Then you have a storage network. So if you do anything via the Cinder, where all your storage stuff, all your storage traffic, that's all managed on a separate network. And then you have the private network. That's where each individual virtual machine gets its own IP address that the private talks to that public interface, and it routes through there. So yeah, the networking is a little bit more complex than just a straightforward subnet for VMware or Proximox or something like that. But
you said that each virtual server has its own subnet?
no,
Oh, okay.
each task, each function has its own subnet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Not each server, each task. So typically, this is all the stuff that has to be done command line. When you're setting all this stuff up, you have to do all this via command line. The Branches Fuel takes that work from you, automatically assigns your interface. You can move stuff around, drag and drop, do whatever. It configures your network interfaces for you, so you don't have to do that. You go in here, you click apply, go back to your nodes. If I want to go here, I can manage my storage. So I'm looking at the disk, I can resize my hard drive partitions. All that stuff that you normally do doing from command line can be done through a web interface for you. You go in here, you can configure your networks. You have the ability to do a network verification to test that all the networks are talking to each other, all the traffic is flowing properly, stuff like that. There's a slew of extra settings that you go in there, you can tweak the different environments if you want to. And then there's a health check if you want to. It goes in and tests, make sure everything's working. Like I said, this is all the stuff that you typically have to do command line when you want to set up an OpenStack environment. Mirantis does it for you.
Now, is that free open?
Yeah, it's free.
Not open.
Yeah, it's open.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it uses Puppet on the back end to configure stuff. That's a whole other presentation. I'm not going to bring that up, but it uses, so it's free, but if you want, it's another support model. If you want support, then you have to pay to get support for stuff.
When you've got physical machines, I understand assigning subnets to things, but somewhere that has to land on physical cable.
Yeah, you got to configure that in your switch.
Okay.
So what I've done is I go in, I have one switch. One subnet is not tagged, it's untagged, and then the rest of my subnets are tagged.
Okay.
And so when you go in here in the network settings, you see, you manage, tell it to use VLAN tagging.
Yep. Oh, you did.
On each of the subnets there, and that your switch manages that for you, the tagging of stuff.
So you use the Cisco or what?
I've just got a little Dell switch. It just has to be a managed switch is all, but it supports tagging.
Wow.
So I've set up an OpenStack environment with 2 little Supermicro server boards and a small shuttle controller, and then a Dell 16-port switch. So it's not really that expensive to get up and running. It's just you have to shift how you think about virtualization to make sense, for it to make sense. And I've been trying for years to get. I was like, OpenStack's not ready. It's not ready. It's too hard. It's not working. Mirantis takes all that effort out of it for you.
Okay.
So once you're done, you're going to hit deploy, which I'm not going to do because it failed last night when I tried to do it inside a VirtualBox. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and show you. This is my OpenStack environment at home. I have 1 control node. I have 2 compute nodes that are also running the storage. I've gone and configured my network settings. Okay, that's weird that I can't configure that. I can't. Once it's in place, you can't change it. Once an environment has been deployed, you can't go in and tweak it through the Mirantis interface. It is the Mirantis environment web interface. It's locked in place. That is the one downside about it, is you can't, if you want to make changes to a node, you have to delete that node and re-add it to make changes.
Now, if you do OpenStack, could you go in and do it under this cover?
You could, but because everything is Puppet managed, the next time Puppet runs, it would change it back, overwrite what's based on what's on your configuration there. So if you're interested in playing with OpenStack, Mirantis is an easy way to get there.
Okay.
So there's a lot more I could cover off of there. I go in and like all my stuff except for one. I just redeployed this last night. I've tested a bunch of this different stuff. I did a redeployment last night to make sure I got a clean environment to work with. I've got one test that's failing because I don't have the software configured yet. But it does all that health check status for you and everything. And you notice it tells you that you've got a public interface that you can access it at, or you've got the internal network to access it as well. All right, so let me go ahead and sign out of here. So this is the dashboard for OpenStack. This is the management interface that you get in and control your projects. Like that name, do you?
So Mirantis is for the initial setup, and you're going into OpenStack to actually do operational type stuff?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So Mirantis does your initial install and configuration for you to get your environment up and running. And then once you're inside of OpenStack, you can figure it from there. And it's very much like, what's the reason why I asked if anybody here to actually use AWS EC2 is it's very much like that. It takes a little bit to get your brain wrapped around how that works in terms of using instances and volumes and stuff like that. But once it's there and it's in place, especially from a software development standpoint, if they immediately need an instance to test something, you don't have to, as a DevOps engineer, I don't have to provision it for them. They can provision it themselves.
What's the EC2 section of that? I know Amazon Web Services
So EC2.
That EC2 is their compute component. That's the actual cloud component. Yeah, AWS provides all kinds of different services, but EC2 is the actual virtualization and computing component of AWS. So when you first log into OpenStack, you get an overview of your projects, and there's initially just one project. And what you do is you go in, say you've got development, you have infrastructure, you have production, you have QA. You can go in and set up different projects, and inside of each of those projects, the developers or whoever, I keep saying developers because that's the environment that I'm in, but they can go in, they can spin up a new instance inside of those projects and connect to it and management, whether it be Ubuntu or CentOS or whatever. So each project you can go in and have limits, tell it how many processors, how much memory the project can use, stuff like that.
I can understand the developer spinning up a new environment. You're not going to have an end user do this.
Not unless they want to connect to
The point is there's some technical ability required.
yeah, this is not for your average Joe.
Okay.
This is definitely not for your average Joe. So when you get in here, you can see a compute node is called a hypervisor. So I've got my two compute nodes in here. It tells me a breakdown of their, gives them a name, how many CPUs they've used, how many vCPUs total they have, how much RAM is used, how much RAM total. It's a breakdown inventory of your environment, of how much you have and how much is used. Yes, sir.
With regard to how many machines you can have going at one time, there's a formula that you can get off of this interface, so that you can say, I have this base box, and what kind of experience can I get out of this?
I don't know how to answer that. I know that from a financial standpoint, the Mirantis site has some formulas out there that you put in like your hardware specs, and it'll tell you how many VMs they project you can run off of that, and how much like the financial breakdown, depreciation, stuff like that. But overall, there is no configuration. You basically have what's called a flavor, and that's one of the things I was going to demonstrate next. Is so when you want to spin up a new virtual machine in VMware or VirtualBox, you tell it how much memory you want it to have, how much disk space it wants to have, how much memory, CPU, video, all that stuff. You tell all that as you're doing it. Well, inside of OpenStack, you have these flavors that are defined as micro, tiny, small, medium, and it's kind of like it's a template, essentially, is all it is. Yeah, and it tells you have 64 megs of RAM, 512 megs of RAM, how many vCPUs, virtual CPUs you can have, how much disk space you're allowed to have, stuff like that. So as a developer or as a user, you log in. When you go to launch an instance, you get to choose what size it wants to be. So, and then OpenStack, you spin up an instance based on that flavor. OpenStack then looks at all your different hosts and sees if there's any host available that has that many resources available. If it doesn't have those hosts with that many resources available, it fails.
Okay, is there a place you can go look at what OpenStack is looking at and see if this host is running 85%, this one's running 35%, this one's... You see where I'm going?
Yeah, I see where you're going. Not yet, I don't think. It's like when I go in and I look at an individual host, it'll tell me the instances they're running on it, but it doesn't tell me like individual usage. You just kind of have to ascertain that based on these numbers here. Then there's a component that I did not install in the demonstration of Mirantis. It's called Celiometer resource usage. This is Celiometer. It basically statistics of your infrastructure. It tells you like how many CPU memory a certain project is using, how much network traffic a certain project is using. Let me just see what I can get here.
So on these, let's talk about the physical hardware for the compute instances.
Okay.
The actual useful servers, let's call it that, for example. What is running, controlling all those instances on that box? Is it OpenStack?
Yeah, OpenStack has services that it installs.
Who's the parent operating system? Is what I'm getting.
Ubuntu.
Okay.
So in this particular instance, I don't know. It's still waiting. There it goes. It's kind of a breakdown of the different usages there. But so I deployed it with OpenStack as a host operating system, and then inside of those environments, OpenStack installs on top of Ubuntu the services necessary to control the compute nodes, the storage nodes, the networking, all that different aspect of it.
But average value, what would that indicate?
I don't know.
That might be something.
That might be what you're looking for,
Is
yeah.
that right? Yeah.
The question is, could you get onto the Ubuntu parent and look at utilization?
Yeah, that's one thing I want to see them add. So like, you can run statistics graphs, metrics. Let's see, compute. Let me see if I can look at it by storage objects. I was looking to see if I could look at it by
No, by utilization, CPU utilization there.
CPU utilization. Okay,
So that gives you.
but that doesn't give it by group by.
That gives you
Yeah, it doesn't project. I was hoping to do it by hypervisor, which he's going to be able to see the individual
Well,
host.
that's what that recent resource usage is actually per instance, isn't it?
This is per project.
Oh, right.
They groups it by project.
I guess my question is, can you log into the Ubuntu parent where you can use the utilities that are there?
Yeah.
To see total CPU.
Yeah.
Of course, you don't know what's using which. But
Yeah.
you can at least see, oh my gosh, this thing's at 89%, or geez, it's at 37.
Yeah, you can SSH in and control it like you would normally. Like there's actually various command lines that you can run, and I'm actually trying to write some scripts and bash scripts to try and make that whole process easier for the OpenStack environment, because everything's like you got to type the command and then a dash and then something and then options and variables. We're going to try and write some bash scripts to reduce that. So I've covered flavors. Flavors is the virtualization size of stuff. Images. So it comes default with this test VM image. You go in, you define, okay, I uploaded the image for Ubuntu. I uploaded the image for CentOS. So I download them from those different providers. I upload them into this system. And then whenever I go to launch an instance, I can choose the flavor. I can also choose the image that I want to use, whether it be Ubuntu, CentOS, SUSE, Windows. I don't know about Android. Is that where you were going?
No, I was asking.
Yeah,
How easy that's to configure.
I've not done that yet, but that's on my to-do list. They have a Windows image out there for 2012, I believe, but I don't know how the licensing or any of that would work. I don't know if you would just RDP into it. It's on my to-do list, though.
Yeah, CentOS is huge.
Yeah, it was 943 megs for the install. Let's see what else.
You know, is there a reason they have not used SUSE or SUSE, however you want to say it? Is it just one of those things?
I just don't think it's one of your mainstream and then corporate.
In the corporate.
In Europe, it's big too.
It is in Europe?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Big in Europe.
Yeah.
Not here.
So here is pretty much
Red Hat,
Ubuntu and
not
Red Hat
Europe.
is the two that I've seen.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And well, not in corporate per se, but in software development,
Okay.
cloud, Internet of Things, infrastructure, websites, all the stuff that I do is where I'm seeing it at.
I think SUSE is big in Europe. As Red Hat is here.
Yeah.
First slice is small.
We use it like
So,
Chris likes it.
like as you go in here and you can have multiple projects, like I said. So you go in, you can have a development project, you could have a testing project, whatever. You can track everything inside there. It's kind of like a folder to manage all this different stuff.
But again, if you misconfigure at the beginning, it's a wipeout and redo again.
Yeah,
So you have to make sure you're cautious enough to make it large enough.
yeah. So you have to know what you're doing, and you have to spec it out in advance. I think what they're trying to get to, though, is the point is with the fuel, you can have multiple clusters. So if this one fails, you can spin up another environment using different hardware and launch a whole nother. But then you have to go in and reconfigure all your network and everything.
So there's no chance, there's no future thought about making it dynamic based on certain parameters. Like let's say you go over a certain threshold on CPU or memory or whatever it is.
Yeah,
It doesn't need an alert that says, okay, this you might need to tweak and dynamically allocate a bit more space.
It's open source.
well, from the environment itself, no, but you can inside of OpenStack. You can go inside and Let me go inside of a project here. Go inside of a project.
Did I understand you correctly? You can move instances from one physical box to another.
Yes, it's kind of touchy with OpenStack. I tried that using the iSCSI backend, and it didn't work. I've now switched to using the Ceph backend. I'm going to test that out and give that a try and see if it works or not, because it would just randomly just quit working. And you're like, what the heck? So you have to go to command line and start looking at the logs, and you see, well, it's stuck, and then you have to do a whole bunch of stuff. Ceph, I'm hoping is going to be a lot easier. Plus, this version of Mirantis 6 just came out 2 weeks ago, and that was with the new version of OpenStack versus the 5.1 of Mirantis was using an older version of OpenStack. So there's already, just between the two versions, I've seen a lot of improvements from the interface itself, and stuff is working that wasn't working, etc.
Well, the reason, I mean, to his point, what if you oversubscribe? I mean, it may be easier to go buy another piece of hardware.
Can someone get the door? Yeah, basically you just go in and add another piece of hardware if you want to, add another node. But if you can go in here also and you have quotas, each project you can assign a quota if you want to. You can say they can have this many memory, this much storage, this many CPU resources. Yeah, you can tweak that if you want to.
Let's talk about this quota. Can you specify it as percent of total?
No.
Okay.
It's you get this many CPUs, this many memory, this much stuff like that.
If you can say percent, then everybody loses a little on oversubscribe. But
yeah, no, as far as I've seen, it's all very static.
Yeah.
You signing what it is.
How old is the software?
OpenStack?
No, the other one.
Mirantis, I think about 3 years or so.
Okay, so relatively new.
Yeah, it's relatively new.
So they may have a lot more.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and walk through launching an instance.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, you've got someone who wants, you got a developer, you've got someone who needs a new Linux box.
Yeah.
I need to test this out, blah, blah, blah. So you go in here, you click Launch Instance. And there's only one availability zone inside of Mirantis. Inside of, if you were to spin your own, you could probably have different availability zones. That's like data centers, different regions of the building, et cetera, et cetera. You can give it a name.
ID 10T.
yeah.
ID 10. Did you ever write it out? Did you ever write it out?
Have to.
Okay. So give it a name, and you go in here, you choose your flavor, and it tells you the descriptions over here to the side. So micro, tiny, small, and it's going to define that virtual machine based off of those.
Now, will it prevent you from oversubscribing? Okay.
Yeah, if there's not a host with those resources available, it just fails.
Okay.
It doesn't work. You go in there, you can launch multiple. If you wanted like 4 or 5 instances of this spec, you could. They'd have the same name and then like a random string added to the end.
So subscript at the end, yeah.
Yeah, it adds some variable to the end to define it. Then you go in here and you select your source. You can boot from an image, which we have uploaded the Ubuntu image and uploaded the CentOS image. You can boot from a snapshot. So you can take a snapshot of one virtual machine and then launch an image from launch an instance from that snapshot. So you have a mirror, like a clone of the virtual machine that you took a snapshot of.
You see the upload? Is that not be pre-already set up in the OpenStack environment? No, you don't need to upload every time.
No, it's one time.
So it's always there then.
Yeah, it's always there.
So that you can
Yeah.
tailor the versions of and try them all out for compatibility and
Yeah.
migration.
Yeah, so like Ubuntu 12, Ubuntu 14, Ubuntu CentOS 7, CentOS 6, you can define what you want to upload.
Yeah.
But there's multiple different things that you can boot from. I'm going to go ahead and choose boot from image. And I've got my CentOS, I've got my test VM, and then I've got Ubuntu. I'm going to go ahead and choose Ubuntu. Okay, so you have security groups. Your security groups is your firewall. The individual VMs do not have a firewall themselves. OpenStack manages your firewall for you. You go inside a security group and you say what you're going to allow. You're going to allow SSH in. You're going to allow HTTP in, stuff like that.
So if what you're saying is that all of the compute instances have to live with a common security.
No.
No.
You can create different security groups for different projects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's multiple security groups. Sorry.
Permissions, you mean? The permission setups in the environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ouch. Sorry, text from the wife asking to spend money. She never asks. That's when it's asked, you know it's big. Yeah, so my consulting rate for this just went up.
You'll double paying you. Okay.
You'll double my pay. Okay. All right. So what I was offered in the beginning class to do SSH key login, because inside of OpenStack or EC2 there is no passwords for the instances. Once you spin it up, you have to have an SSH key to log into that node. So as you see here, I've already defined a key pair. I've uploaded my private key from my Mac, not my private, my public key pair up to there, and I'm going to define that instance using that public key. Then there's also tasks like I could run custom scripts if I wanted to. Once the instance is spun up, I can have scripts that run to configure it for me, bootstrap it, do whatever. And then from there, it can go and petition hard drives if I want, but I haven't done any of that stuff. So I've configured my key pair. I've configured my security group. All the information that I have about it, I'm going to go ahead and click launch. So now what's happening behind the scenes is OpenStack received the information that I want to launch this instance. The controller node is going out looking at my compute nodes to see if there is a host that has the resources available that I have requested. If it finds a host, it'll go ahead and connect to it, launch it, spin it up. If it does not find a host, it'll just fail. Give me an error message. Hopefully they get better at explaining the error message, because they normally just say launch failed. Like, tell me why.
Yeah, that's
Why not?
That's your short, brief statement.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't get feedback at all. Oh,
So I'm like,
blank line.
yeah, I'm like, way to go, developers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's where you was asking about the security groups for firewalls. So you go in access and security. You have a default security group, and you go in, and I've managed the rules to allow ICMP, so I'm able to ping my instances and enable SSH. If I want to go in and add a new rule to that security group, I just click add rule. If I want to create a new security group, I go over here, I can say create security group. We're going to call it ID10T. ID10T. So I've got a new security group called ID10T. We're going to call it Chuck's security group. Gorp.
Well, that's a new version of it, isn't it?
Create security group. Okay, so it's created the security group. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to manage the rules for this group. I can also delete it. I think if you've already assigned a security group to an instance, you can't delete it. So, yeah. I'm going to go in here and manage the rules. So I'm going to add a rule that I want to allow all ICMP. You can base it by subnet or you can base it by security group. So you can have multiple security groups, and you can define the instances in this security group can talk to this security group, or you can do it based off the network as well. So like subnets.
You have availability back.
No, not MAC address.
Okay.
Security groups or by IP addresses.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as the default. I'm going to say add. And so I want to go in and say add rule. We're going to allow SSH access from everybody. And then we're going to go in and say we're going to allow HTTP access from.
Is there no default kind of set up parameters and you can just import them directly and then modify them? Because this seems to be quite a tedious drop-down menu process, isn't it? There's usually kind of default.
You like phone.
Yeah, it's very, you define it yourself.
Yeah, but then once you define it yourself, can you?
But once you define, you can reuse it.
Oh, that's exactly right. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say.
Command line too, I trust.
Yes, you can, but it's not.
I mean, you could once you had a script, did something you wanted to do.
Yeah, there's you would essentially SSH into the control node, and then you run the command lines, and there's a whole slew of command lines that you can run that does all that. But why?
Yeah.
Just.
Well, if you're going to do a lot of one thing close, you might be really nice.
So up with one set of parameters, and you just copy across. Right.
So you see here that this security group ID10T allows pinging from everybody, allows SSH from everybody, but it only allows HTTP access from instances that would be in the default group. So now I go in here, I go back to my instances. I have my ID10T group. I'm going to edit security groups. I'm going to remove it from the default group, and I'm going to add it to that E10T group. So you're able to pick and choose your security levels as you want per instance and per security group.
Now, is there a place where it'll tell you what compute nodes are using which security group?
It's not the compute node, it's the instance.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll.
Okay, yeah, the instance.
Yeah, the instance itself. I don't think it has that ability from the web interface to be able to tell you, like you list security groups and then who all is using it. I don't think it'll tell you that.
Okay.
Okay, that's weird. So evidently I can delete a security group once it's been assigned. You just can't delete the default one.
Okay.
So here's where you manage your key pairs, add the different key pairs and such. So floating IPs, the concept of floating IPs, if you go in here and you look at the instance, I defined this in my settings. So I was telling you each instance has 2 IP addresses. It has the private IP address that they can use to talk to each other, and then they have the public IP address. That is the IP address that I've given it to it, and I told Mirantis that I wanted my instances to automatically get both IPs whenever it boots up. A lot of times people don't want that. They want it to be very siloed. They go in there and they only have that IP address, and then what you're able to do is, and in AWS this is called Elastic IP. You go in here, you can allocate, you have a pool, a range of IP addresses that you can add to the project, and you just click allocate IP. So it now adds an IP address to this project, and then you're able to go in here and say, okay, I want to associate this IP address to an instance. So that way what I've done is, if you don't care about your IPs, then you can just let them grab a default. But if you say, okay, this is going to be a DNS server, I'm going to tell all my servers to use this IP address as my DNS, but then your DNS host crashes, you don't have to go back in and reconfigure all your different hosts. So what you do is you simply move this associated IP address to a different instance. So your DNS server crashes.
You have to manually move it?
Yeah. So if you've got 2 DNS, you got an old DNS server, and you've assigned this IP address, this 10.172.17.0223, to this server, okay? You've configured all your other machines on your entire network to use this as your DNS server, but then that DNS server crashes, okay? Well, you can either rebuild it and relaunch it and fix it, or you just say, I don't care about that instance anymore. I'm going to spin up a new DNS server, but I don't want to have to go in and reprogram all my other instances that I've already programmed. You just move that IP address from that instance to this instance.
So you HA it?
Probably not with Nova. Maybe with the more complex Neutron, yeah, I think you could.
Okay.
But this,
Okay.
You may have asked this question, right? But is that allocating 3 IP addresses, or is it specifying a range from 192.2.3?
no, that's 3 IP addresses.
Oh,
That's 3 specific IP addresses. I don't know any rhyme or reason that they use,
Yeah.
because if you notice, the first one I spun up,
Yeah.
these are 2 I did last night. 8 grabbed 128, but then the next one is 191. And I've noticed that every single time I spin this up, I launch 2 instances. Those are the first 2 IPs that get dished out, and I have no idea why.
Well, it could be just yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So now, why would you want 3 IP addresses for the first one, for example?
Well, like I said, so this one is the private IP address. They're always going to have that.
Yeah.
Then typically you don't. You would only have 1 IP address.
Yeah.
But I defined it to where when it boots up automatically. So if I'm a developer that I want an access to an instance, I don't want to have to go in and change an IP address and assign it. I just want to be given an IP address.
Yeah.
So I've told Mirantis I want my OpenStack to automatically give IP addresses. So that's where you see this one. Mirantis gave it that IP address.
Right.
But then I went in and told it that I wanted to also have that IP address.
But so what's the value of having 3 IP addresses assigned to one instance?
Well,
I'm just trying to
ideally,
Not a web server I want.
ideally you would want this. If you give it a specific IP address, this one should go away in my mind, but it doesn't.
That's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to
no. It should, in my mind, if you guys assign an IP address to it, it should. This other one that was automatically assigned should go away, but it's not.
That's
Maybe that's on the roadmap. I don't know.
okay.
So this particular instance, when we spun it up, I'm going to cover volumes now. So it has a 20 gig hard drive, but I want to give it a bigger hard drive. I need more disk space at 20 gigs. So that's where this volumes come into place. Volumes are essentially virtual hard drives. Like you add additional hard drive in VMware, you add additional VMDK and virtual or VDI and VirtualBox, whatever. So you can go in here and you can create a volume. Say, I want to give it ID 10T. You can have a description, whatever. It's no, there's nothing on it. It's going to be a blank volume. And how big do you want this volume to be?
How much of it do you have available?
On these hosts, I may have.
1 gig available? So that's 1 gig.
That's in the quota.
All right. Okay.
That's in the quota. On the host itself, I've got maybe like 90 gigs or so.
So if you were to over allocate, what would
it fails. You have to go in and modify the quota.
But would it fail right away here, or would just accept it? Let's say you.
It would accept it here. It would attempt to launch it. So you accept it here.
Yeah.
The controller would go out and look for those resources to find it, and if it's not there, then it would fail.
So there's no restraint check here at this point in time?
No, not at this point.
Okay. So you have to know what you're doing then again.
Yeah.
Full spec. Yeah. Back to the old story.
But here's the catch. In my honest opinion, OpenStack is not for the small business of I've got 5 servers. No, it's not a good fit. If you've got 50 servers, then I think it's a good fit. If you have a large infrastructure and you want to be able to move stuff dynamically, move stuff around, if you got 50 employees in your company, if they're software developers or they're DevOps or system administrations or whatever they're doing, and they need to be able to quickly provision stuff, and they always having to wait on you to launch a new VM, this removes that barrier. So it is complex. I see I've lost a large part of the crowd. Everyone's looking at their phones, looking at their stuff.
Especially development.
Yeah.
Because in regression testing, you have multiple instances running. You can test your software across all the folders.
But if you're a small business with like 5 servers or less, this is not a good fit. But if you have a lot of overhead initially, but once it's in place, it works.
Yeah.
That's the thing is that the learning curve for me was considerable. But once I've gotten it learned, it's easy for me now, and I get it. It took a long time for that to. I'm like, why do you have an internal and external IP address? Why can't you just give it an IP address? Why do I have to add this volume? Just let me allow that add it once I'm launching it. Stuff like. But as I've used the AWS tools more and more for my job, this is now starting to make sense. So, is there anything else? So I go in and edit attachment. I can attach the instance to whatever volume. So I've got all my instances show up there that are part of this project, and I can attach it to any one of these.
Do you assign the file system type here, or do you assign a compute instance and it decides?
You don't assign a compute instance. The controller goes out and finds a storage node, a storage instance, and adds this storage to that. Then once it's added, you go in and it's already partitioned, but you have to define a file system type, whether it be XFS or ext4 or whatever the case may be.
Associating with a specific compute instance?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm assigning. So I've assigned my ID10T instance, my ID10T 15 gig volume. I have now attached that to my ID10T instance on dev VDB.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So with regard to like backing these things up, you created all your images, and you want to make sure that you keep these images. What is the best way to get that?
I'm still working on that. That's the one component. So VMware, if you want to back things up, you got to buy something extra. Hyper-V, if you want to back something up, depending on how well you trust the Windows backup tool, it'll back it up. Proxmox has a built-up backup tool. As best, what all I've found that can handle your backups in here is you go in, you choose your instance, and you create a snapshot of that instance. That is best as I've found so far. I haven't gone down that road yet. That's actually one of the next things that I want to investigate is how do you back these things up?
You take a snapshot, but you want to make sure that I'm talking about, I guess,
Where's that snapshot going? How do you get it?
It goes onto a storage node, and then when you go and if you look at your images, so we had our VM, Ubuntu, CentOS image, it has now created a snapshot that you can launch a new instance from that snapshot.
Okay, but how do you back that snapshot up to some other media?
Probably your storage node where these things reside. You probably copy it off from there. So you SSH in, you can probably just rsync that off of there. That's the next thing I need to investigate. I'm
How
not
does
there
this
yet.
get down to reality?
Yeah, no, I fully understand.
Is there a way to back up the high-level configurations, like what your network architecture is and how much
Inside of
allocated?
Yeah, inside of Mirantis, it's able to back up the Mirantis environment of your host, your configuration, stuff like that. But what you're asking though is the actual OpenStack infrastructure itself.
Basically, if you want to recreate the network, you have a backup for each node, but you also need the IP addresses and network information.
That's all handled through Mirantis. Mirantis handles all the IP infrastructure.
Well, but let's say whatever it is that Mirantis is on crashes. Now you've got to go from scratch. Is there a way to
There's a backup inside of Mirantis, the command line backup that you run as the script that you can't do it through the web interface, but you SSH in. You can add this on as a cron job, and it backs up to a certain volume. And then what you do is you reinstall your Mirantis node or your Mirantis install, and then you restore from that backup, and all the configuration everything should be there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I will admit this: the Mirantis documentation is really good. For most open source projects, I'm fine. Like I'm trying to get up to speed on the new version of Puppet. My head has been hurting for the past 2 days because I just keep getting circular. The Mirantis documentation is actually really good, I've found. I mean, they step-by-step walk you through how to do the various, install it on VirtualBox. It breaks down the explanation of the networking, Nova versus Neutral, and stuff like that. It's really well laid out, in my opinion. So, that being said, like I said, small business, OpenStack is probably not a good fit. If you have like 5 servers or less, I would go with Proxmox or something. But if you need to be able to be very dynamic, very fluid, roll stuff out, you have a lot of hardware you want to manage, and you don't want to have to manage it, like balance all the different stuff, it might be worth checking into. And I think that's all I got. So
what is Proxmox? What do you see the benefits of for a small environment?
Wow, we actually have people in the OpenStack room, or I mean in the NTLUG room. Cool.
Are you looking at the IRC?
Yeah.
There's a guy from Arizona that's asking about IT recruiters in this area. He wants to relocate here. Anybody
Gotcha.
know?
Yeah, I saw the mailing list.
They've been scarce lately.
Well,
Somebody gave me the card for the technical recruiter from Mirantis.
Mirantis, seriously, wow.
Yes,
That's why-
I wants to write it down.
Well, here,
I was down at Austin 2 nights ago, and they had an OpenStack get together. That's the name of the recruiter in Austin. And so they had a talk on OpenStack by somebody from Tesora. And then
So I'm getting caught up on the chat. Sorry, give me a second. So yeah, I actually have a list of recruiters I can talk to that I can put together because I just went through a new job in December. So I had about 3 or 4 different recruiters well, I had about 15 to 20 that contacted me, but I only had about 3 or 4 that I actually engaged with and that had positions I was interested in. So
just tell him to check the mail list. Huh?
well, I saw the mail list, but I'll reach out to them directly. I don't want to be just spamming these people.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Okay.
Put stuff on there.
So I think they gave a talk on Cloud Foundry.
I've heard of that. I haven't looked into it yet.
This guy ran it on his 8-gig laptop, and then he could. It would define a cloud-friendly spin-up or something. That might be something.
That's along the same lines of what this does, yeah.
So long did it take you to get yourself proficient in this product?
And this one, I've been working on this about 3 or 4 months now. I've got my 3 machines. I've got 4 machines at the house. I've got 2 small shuttles, bare bones machines that one's my fuel node, one's my control node, and then I have 2 super micros. Those are the lab machines that I was going to bring in. I was going to try and do actual trainings here in the group, and those are my compute nodes. They're 16 gigs of RAM. They've got Intel processors, like i3 or i5 or something like that.
So what are the minimum configuration just to experiment with it at home yourself?
If you minimum of two
2 machines.
for OpenStack,
Yeah.
and then 3 for the Mirantis. So 1 for Mirantis, unless you can virtualize it somehow. So like what I would do is run VirtualBox on your laptop, install Fuel to there,
Yeah.
and then plug in have 2 nodes. 1 is your control, and then 1 is your compute and your storage.
Yeah.
That's probably the bare minimum you can get by with.
There are several development setups that work on one machine. It helps if you have 32 to 64 gig.
Yeah.
Now, HP Helium or something.
Yeah.
As a development version, they want a G8 and 64 gig of RAM. I don't know if it's going to be less. I only have G5. Also, what's the one down in San Antonio? Rackspace.
Rackspace.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've had their private cloud.
It required 32 gig, and I haven't looked at it.
They used to, that's actually Rackspace Private Cloud is the first one I worked with. And they actually had an ISO that you could download and install.
Yeah.
And it was either 1 node or 2 nodes. So they would do everything in one box, compute and control and everything.
Yeah.
And that's what actually when I circled back around, I was getting tired of Proxmox. I circled back around and I saw that they discontinued it.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, so they want you have to do a minimal install first, and then you have to run all these scripts. I don't want that.
Yeah.
I want something that's very point and click driven, like what I showed here, and that's where the Mirantis, I just stumbled across it, and they're actually starting to gain more and more market share. The Helion, I've actually looked at that as well. Again, you have to do a minimal install, and then you have to do all these command line.
I think they said they went Ubuntu 13.10 or something like that.
They typically send to the LTS releases, so like 12.04, so it's probably 14.
It won't run it. It says it will not run it.
Huh.
Probably because it builds it in the scripts. There may be different dependencies in scripts. Or something broke and they haven't fixed it.
Yeah. From what I've found, most of the providers from the cloud standpoint, they want you to use the LTS versions. So like the 12.04, the 14. I tried 13 for a while because so like with Ubuntu has their own. You install a node and then it's the MMAS or MAAS, Metal as a Service, and they want you to use Juju and like these charms and all, and it's all command line stuff. And I'm not scared of the command line, but I get tired of living there all the time.
Well, when I was looking at virtualization, my impression was that Ubuntu had their interfaces up late. They brought up KVM on their servers. So to run virtualization on a server, all you need is KVM.
Yeah.
It was, straightforward, but they didn't have their interfaces.
The pretty side of it, yeah, the management and all that stuff.
So that's why.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of virtualization out there. You can do a minimal install of CentOS or whatever, and then actually, well, not minimum install, but you define it. You want it as a virtual host. It'll install the minimal server component, the minimal GUI, and then you'll have the Virt manager that allows you to manage the KVM and stuff like that. But when you're managing multiple servers, you want something that does all that for you. If you're only managing 1 or 2 servers, that's fine. But if you're managing, like at my last job, I was managing 32 servers, 32 physical servers. And it's you have to go, I don't want to be connecting to each one independently from each other to manage them. You want one interface that can handle everything. So, any other questions for anybody, or can I start shutting stuff down?
So, what were you running on? Is this a website?
See, man.
See,
Website that allows you to trial run these things?
Well, I just downloaded the ISO. I downloaded the ISO, burned it to a disk, installed Mirantis on my test node, my whatever, and then I have a small lab of hardware at my house.
Is this running on your lab?
Yeah, this is running on my lab at my house. I've opened up my firewall from this IP address, and then I've also edited my host file so that the name shows up on the screen. You try to do an innocent look on that, and it's not going to do anything.
Okay.
So you like my host name up there?
Stonehackme.example.com.
Yes. Sweet.
Cute.
My question was,
Yes, sir.
so talking about the placement of the compute. To your knowledge, does it try to do a best fit? Like, looking at this, you got the size of the tiny, large.
Yeah.
So that assumes more CPU, more memory, more disk, possibly even more I/O. Does it have any kind of?
I know where you're going with this, and not yet. What I would love for them to be able to do is, so when you launch an instance, you say what its function is, because you don't. Yeah, so you may want a database server and a web server. Both of them only have 2 vCPUs, and you got a single host that has 4 vCPUs available. But you want them on separate. You want them on separate physical hosts. I would love to see that as something they add. Is you define what that role is going to be, and they have something that I actually wiped it last night because I'm not ready to mess with that yet. But the Hadoop, it'll actually manage to roll out a Hadoop cluster for you and everything. I'm not quite there yet. I'm like, okay, I don't need to be confusing people more than I already am. So I'm able to, this environment I have, I'm going to stop broadcasting so that